Everybody is welcome to this session. We'll start with the speech by our speaker, Professor Hasnat Dewan. Let me briefly introduce him to you. Professor Dewan has 30 years of teaching experience in economics at universities in the United States of America, Canada, China, and Bangladesh. Currently, he is a professor of economics at Thompson Rivers University, a member of the Thompson University Board of Governors, and chair of the Bob Gagliardi School of Business and Economics. He also served as the chair of economics, the coordinator of the School of Business and Economics International Programs, Thompson River University senator, a director of the University Faculty Association Executive Board. Professor Dewan's exemplary leadership was recognized with the Thompson University Chair Leadership Award. Over 20 awards of academic, teaching, research, and service excellence from institutions in 4 countries highlight Professor Dewan's achievements. As a Fulbright scholar, he earned his MA from Yale University and a PhD from University of Texas at Austin. He was also awarded the University Gold Medal for securing the highest marks among the graduating students from all undergraduate programs of the University of Jahangirnagar, Dhaka, Bangladesh of that year. Professor Dewan's primary research area is sustainable development. Alongside publishing articles and contributing chapters to respected journals and books, he has presented his work at over 30 conferences and seminars across Asia, Europe, Australia, and North America. He has served on thesis and project supervising committees for BBA, MBA, MSc in Environmental Science, MSc in International Economics and Management, MA and doctoral students. With this brief introduction, I am honored and pleased to call upon Professor Dewan to give his space. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jahid, for this flattering introduction. I am really honored. I will share my screen if I can. I'll see. It will be easier for you to follow. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Professor, we can.
Okay, so yeah, first I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to give a speech this morning. So I will talk about various assessment and presentation tools to measure progress towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals that all of you are familiar with. So here is a brief overview of the presentation. I'll talk about various dimensions of sustainable development and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And after that, I will explain the various tools that have been used to measure those Sustainable Development Goals and various presentation techniques that researchers have used. And after that, I will talk about a few global initiatives, and I'll also look at Canada's performance in achieving those goals. So that's a brief outline of the presentation. Now, there are many definitions of sustainable development, as you know. Now, the most popular one is, of course, the one by Brundtland Commission. Let me just use my pen. Yeah, so the most popular one says sustainable development is meeting the basic needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So without compromising, that's one thing, and the ability of future generations to meet their needs. But it also mentions that we should not forget about meeting the basic needs of the present generation. So, for example, if you have an exhaustible uh, stock of natural resources, let's say we have 100 units of natural resources, then we want to allocate it between the present and the future generations. How do we do that efficiently? I'm an economist. As an economist, we use what we call the hoteling rule. And that just gives us this formula. I'm not going to go over that. That's the formula for dynamic efficiency. Now, if you look at the variables here, so it looks at the present price, the price of the resource at the present time, and the price of the resource in the future, and the cost of resource extraction. Now, one thing that is controversial is the discount rate. What discount rate should we use? Okay, if we want to allocate resources, because as you know that $100 today is not the same as $100 10 years later. But again, in finance, we can use bank interest rate, bond interest rate, etc., as as the discount rate. But many researchers argue that that is not the right discount rate to use when you talk about using of natural resources, or when you talk about allocating natural resources between generations. So there are debates around the use of that discount rate. And then, of course, substitutability is another big issue, because we use fossil fuel today. If no one uses fossil fuel for 50 years from now, what is the point of conserving all of those uh, oil reserves? So that can be a question. Do we really need to conserve them if we know that 50 years later they're not going to use it? Okay, so that's another thing, substitutability. And of course, we know that technology improves. All of you have seen the advancement of AI and all those things. They can also hopefully help achieve some of those sustainable development goals. So we'll talk about some of those in a little bit. Okay, I'll go to the next slide. Okay, there are, of course, various concerns that we have about sustainable development, and climate change is definitely one thing. And we don't want to use up all of the natural resources because if there are no regulations, there will be tragedy of the commons, what we call it. And then we have seen the pandemic. Anything like that can happen again. I hope it doesn't happen, but again, you never know. Then public debt is becoming a big problem for many countries. There are indigenous issues, poverty and inequality. Now, one thing that I want to point out is that when we are facing wars, refugee crisis, famine in some parts of the world, can the economic development on the planet be sustainable without addressing those issues? Professor, do you have a question? I can see a hand. Yeah, so my point is that when we see all these problems, the can we make, let's say, for example, Canada's economic development sustainable, or European economic development sustainable without addressing those issues? Okay, my answer is no. Okay, we need to address those issues. Otherwise, the global economic development is not going to be sustainable. And again, if we go back to the most popular definition of sustainable development that talks about meeting the basic needs of the present generation, which doesn't include the people who live in parts of the world that are not as developed as the country where we live. Okay, and the UN Sustainable Development Goal actually looks at both present and future concerns. I'll show you those in a second. Now, before I show you that, one thing is that when you talk about sustainability, there are various dimensions of sustainability. Many people talk about just environmental sustainability. So we know that we are polluting the environment, we are using up exhaustible natural resources. Yeah, that's certainly one dimension of sustainability that we definitely need to be concerned about. But then at the same time, we need to look at social and economic and institutional sustainability as well. Now, in the business world, the triple bottom line approach is becoming more and more popular, which talks about people, planet, and prosperity. Okay, so instead of prosperity or profit, sometimes we call it. So instead of just profit, many businesses now want to look at people and planet, okay, which talks about social responsibility and also environmental stewardship. Okay. In addition to those three, now some researchers are adding two more P's, peace and partnership, with that. So they call it 5 P's. So we need to look at these 5 P's when we talk about achieving sustainable development. Now, these are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. All of you have seen that picture, I believe. Okay. Now, it looks at economic, environmental, and social sustainability. Now, the question is, how do we achieve those goals? So this is called the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, and countries agreed to achieve those goals or at least get closer to those goals by 2030. We have only 6 years left, and I'm sure that most countries will not achieve those goals. Okay, but again, as long as we move in the right direction, that's an achievement. And again, I'm sure they will be revising those goals before 2030. Again, they will meet. Countries will, their representatives will meet and try to define new goals. Now, here I'll be looking at different indices that are used to measure those goals, and also how different researchers present those things. Okay. So data dashboard is one. I'll talk a little more about it in a little bit. Okay, Sustainable Development Goal Index score, which puts equal weight on each of those indicators. That's the limitation of it. It's been calculated for some cities. Okay, distance to the Sustainable Development Goal targets. That's another approach. Now, Genuine Wellbeing Index is something that was used in a city in Alberta. They calculated it, okay, Genuine Wellbeing Index. And there are some researchers who use mathematical modeling to define the weights of different indicators, okay, that is appropriate for a particular region, and try to calculate composite indices. Okay. In one of my papers, I used Sustainable Development Trajectory. I will show you that. Okay. And of course, these days there are talks about using big data, the satellite data, mobile phone data, and other data, micro level data. Okay. But there are problems with that too. And AI is becoming a big thing, of course, as all of you know. And we'll see how AI can affect the achievement of those goals very briefly. Okay. So considering the time limit, I'm not going to go over every single point from my slides. I'll show you talk about a few things. The wedding cake approach is one thing that many people like. Okay, if you look at this wedding cake model that was used by Stockholm Resilience Center, it has 3 layers, as you can see at the bottom. Let me just make it bigger. Yeah, at the bottom we have biosphere, which has these 4 indicators out of those 17, and then society in the middle. There are 8 indicators there, and then economy, 4 indicators there, and the last one, 17th one, is the partnership. So that's the way they layered those indicators, okay, and try to see how much progress they made in each of those categories. Okay. And Sustainable Development Goal Index score is calculated for many European cities. Um, as you can see here, Oslo, Stockholm, Helsinki, and these are their index values of the scores. Okay. And when the score is more than 70, it's dark green, as you can see. Okay. So that's the best if it becomes green or dark green. And then again, when it's red, that means it's less than 50. You can see one here. Okay, so what they did, they tried to put equal weight on all those 17 indicators and try to calculate a composite index and see how a particular city or a region has done in terms of achieving those goals. This is another approach which talks about the distance to the Sustainable Development Goal targets. Now, as all of you know, that each of those goals have many targets, right? We measure those targets to see how far progress have been made to achieve those goals. So if you take any of them, now this one uses a 5P approach, as I said before. As you can see, people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. So that those 5Ps, and I showed you the indicators for each of those P. And then again, when you look at any of them, let's say this one is no poverty, the first one. Then we look at the indicators here. Okay, so they look at these indicators, and as you can see in some of the indicators, well, if it is for a country has done very well, but it hasn't done very well in terms of another particular indicator. So that's the way they try to measure this, measure the performance of a country. Okay, so that's distance to the Sustainable Development Goal target. If it reaches here, that's the best. That means they have achieved that goal. And as I told you before, that the Genuine Wellbeing Index was calculated for a city in Alberta, and it shows the performance of the city, this yellow part, relative to the performance of the province. So let's say the province has achieved the target here, okay, but the city is not at that level. So this just shows at what level the city is relative to the performance of the province, okay, whether it's behind or not. That's something we can tell from there. And then, as I said, so some people like to use mathematical models. And in that case, I'm not going to go over the models. I'll show you in the next 2 slides, but I'm not going to discuss those. They look at different, first, they will have to put everything in different categories and then put different weights on each of them. And the weights are calculated objectively. These are not subjective weights, or these are not equal weights. So if the 5Ps approach is used, then we know that these are the goals that are goals 1 to 5 is in this category, and then like 17 is in the last category. If the wedding cake approach is used, then there are 3 categories, and we have those different goals. And if we use a different framework like social, environmental, and economic goals, then again, we can categorize them accordingly, and then put weights based on the mathematical models. I'll show you the models in a second. But as I said, I'm not going to discuss that in detail here unless you really want to. And the weights are calculated, and then we can get we can evaluate the performance of that particular region. Now, it was used to calculate the performance of Fujian, for example, in China, okay, by some researchers. And this is one model that I used in one of my papers. So I'll just briefly talk about that. Here we have, I looked at Human Development Index, and when Human Development Index is 1, that's the best, of course, and here Human Development Index is 0, and you can use economic growth or anything. So this is the best possible outcome. In Tops's model, we call it positive ideal solution. That's where we want to go to. And this is the negative ideal solution, or that's the worst possible outcome. We want to be away from that point. Now, the question is, if we think about two countries, let's say country A and country D, if you look at them, so country A has achieved most of its sustainable development goals, or they have done very well in terms of achieving those goals, but the damage to the environment that they caused is relatively low. On the other hand, if we look at country D, they haven't achieved much, but they have already damaged the environment quite a bit, and they have used up a lot of their natural resources. So that's a risky situation. So they need to be more conservative in the use of natural resources, exhaustible natural resources. They need to have stricter environmental regulations compared to this country. Okay. So what I'm suggesting is that the cost benefit analysis, the monetary cost benefit analysis that we use in economics, that may not apply or may not be appropriate for these two countries, because these two countries are in two different situations. Okay. So this is my personal opinion, and I'll move on to other ideas. Now, of course, as I said, people talk about big data these days a lot. We get satellite data, cell phone data. We have so many credit card, debit card transactions, and social media provides a lot of data. Okay, some people say those data can be used to help achieve the sustainable development goals. Sure, they can, but again, we know that many of them are not structured. Reliability can be a big question there. Okay, so how do we combine that with all the research data that we have, or the reliable data sources that we have? Now, the UN launched several initiatives to encourage member countries to use big data. So they started it in 2017, how big data can be used for sustainable development. Then Harvard, MIT, and a few other organizations are conducting training sessions at various locations around the world, okay, to show how the big data can be used, okay, to monitor progress on UN sustainable development goals. So there are some resources that are available. Okay, I will just skip this slide and go to the next one. Now, Oxford, the Human Development Incubator at Oxford has been investigating the potential uses of big data for advancing human development and addressing equity gaps. Now, again, as I said, the quality of big data is a serious concern. And also many of those data are held by the private sector. Okay, so there are privacy issues there, and whether they can give easy or access to everybody, that can, well, that's always questionable. Okay, so privacy security issues are there, and what we say is the structured and combining the structured and unstructured data can cause problems, because when you combine your good data with bad data, yeah, so it's corrupted, right? As we say in statistics, GIGO, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So if you put that in your programming, you're not going to get good results and reliable results. So again, a lot of work need to be done. There are some software that people use these days to deal with big data. Python is one common one. Okay, Apache Spark, R, etc. Okay, that are used to gather, analyze, interpret, and present the data. Now, AI is, of course, the next best, next big thing. I don't know it's the best thing. Well, I hope it's the best thing. ChatGPT has taken the world by storm, and since its emergence, new AI-based tools have been developed. And when we talk about AI, it can be machine learning, neural networks, natural language processing, robotics, etc. Okay, the question is, how will they affect the achievement of sustainable development goals? Not much work has been done in that area. Well, this is, we know that this field is advancing very fast, and you probably have seen this kind of videos, right? How you can go from text to video. I'll not play those videos. Okay, you can find them on the net. Oh, it started playing. Okay, I'll go to the next one. Okay, so to date, there is no published study systematically assessing the extent to which AI might impact all aspects of sustainable development. Only one large study was done well, that one was actually done in 2020, and that shows that AI can enhance the progress toward achieving 134 of the 169 targets of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. As I mentioned before, we have 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and those goals have 169 targets. And this study shows that AI can help achieve those goals faster, right, in 134, in case of 134 indicators. And it will impact negatively to achieve 59 targets. Like, for example, if you think about employment, so there is a possibility of job loss, which can happen, right? So that's the negative impact, just to give an example, okay? And when I say job loss in certain fields, of course, there will be job creations in some other fields. So we know that people were afraid when computers came. They thought that would take away a lot of jobs, but we know that many more jobs were created. So as economists, we like to be optimistic about new technologies and innovations. Now, there have been quite a few global initiatives. Again, I will not go over all of them. There are some local reviews. Some cities have been trying to align their sustainable development strategies with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now, some cities believe that they cannot target all of them, so they pick a few targets and strategies and then try to achieve only those goals. This city in Taiwan, they use what they called COW as the guiding principle. Okay, and again, they have economy, employment, peace of mind, quality of life, education, those 5 categories, and they try to calculate the indicators. They group the indicators based on those 5 categories and then try to see how much progress they have made in each of those categories. Malaysia Sustainable Development Goals cities, okay, more and more cities are now joining the network, and they have been providing roadmap towards sustainable cities, okay. And by 2018, they had 99.
Could you just repeat it?
They have 126 national and 107 city indicators that became available. So people are trying to align, or cities are trying to align their sustainable development strategies with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I'll skip this few slides. Now let's see how Canada has done in terms of achieving those goals. We have federal sustainable development strategy, and we also have sustainable development strategies at the provincial level. So this one shows that Canada ranks 21st out of 165 countries. and its country score in that year was 79.2. And this diagram here shows how much progress they made in terms of each of those goals. To put it in perspective, I'll show you the performance of Bangladesh, perhaps that will help. This might want to stop sharing this. Okay, I'll show that at the end. Okay, so this one is 21st. Okay, if I want to show the performance of Bangladesh. Okay, now these are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Professor Chait, do you have something to say?
Honorable Professor Dewan,
We are running out of time, I guess.
may I invite your attention, please, Professor Dewan? Yes, please. If you kindly
Okay, I'll wrap it up in like 2 minutes.
finish it up in a minute.
Okay. Okay, so as you can see,
All right,
Canada has done well in some of them, like no poverty, quality education. It's not doing well in terms of responsible consumption and production. Okay. Okay, and this is where I live. This is a small city in Kamloops, small and nice city. Okay, as you can see. But if you look at the next slide, then you will realize what we face during the summer, in some summers. Wildfires, haze, flood, etc. So that shows all the environmental issues that we face. So it goes from here to there in some summer. And in Kamloops, yeah, we have sustainable development plans, sustainable Kamloops plan, and they are focusing mainly on homelessness and affordable housing. Okay. And I guess this is my last slide. And I would say that we need to focus on achieving the optimum sustainable development path. Countries need to define that. Big data and AI can be used for that. Okay. And peaceful and inclusive societies are essential for sustainable global development. So I cannot emphasize enough the importance of SDG 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions, and partnership for the goals. And that's all I have. But then, as I said, I wanted to share the performance of Bangladesh with you, but I don't know if we have time. Or maybe if you have questions, I can just show that to you just in 1 second. I said, okay. Okay, I should stop sharing this. You see my screen? Yeah, so Canada ranks 21st and
yes.
You can see it. Yeah, so this is the ranking of Bangladesh. So we can see how much progress we have made. We are 101, right, out of 166 countries. So our ranking is that. And this is the Sustainable Development Goal Index score. Okay. And in many of these cases, as you can see, we are going backward. So we need to work a lot, right, to achieve those 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, so thank you for your time. Okay, I'll just stop here.
Thank you, Professor Dewan, for your wonderful speech.
Or if there is
A
no
word of
time, we
appreciation
can.
to Dr. Professor Devan. Wonderful. You've triggered an inspiration and an existing interest in me to look into. Suppose we would like to do a similar small project for a state in India. Maybe have a copy of how you did the calculations and what are the indicators you used for the people to measure people, especially prosperity. Yes, planet we also know, but people, is it the skill or is it the kind of unemployment? What exactly are the criteria you used as indicator to measure the development goals?
Yeah, that's a very important and very good question because one is the overarching thing, which is the Sustainable Development Goals, like that's the high level goals that we want to achieve. But how do we materialize it? How do we implement it at the local level? So what the suggestions are, or what many regions or cities are doing, they're trying to see which indicators are more appropriate given the socioeconomic condition in that particular region. Instead of looking at the targets that the UN has set for each of those goals, which targets are more important, or is there any other target that's more relevant? Okay. And if you can justify that, you just look at those indicators only to measure progress in achieving a particular goal. Let's say if you're talking about employment side, yeah, so what kind of jobs people do there. And if you talk about environment, yeah. So you just look at that particular sector, and as a local person, you probably know where are what the problems in that region are, and what kind of environmental issues or resource issues that particular region faces. And based on that, you decide what would be the more appropriate indicator, which may not be the appropriate indicator, for example, for Toronto.
So it may vary from country to country.
It may vary from country to country,
location
from
to
region
location.
to region.
Okay.
But when we compare global, or when you make country comparisons, then we need to have some kind of consistency, right? But at the local level, yeah, you can, those indicators can vary significantly.
Because I was looking forward for NSRIC to have a consultancy, just in case we follow your path or guidance of how you did for a particular, we could do it for a particular state as a consultant, from NSRIC on behalf of NSRIC.
Yeah.
So we would love to have, if you could share your research work with us, we'd be very glad, so that we could further discuss and seek your guidance.
Sure, I would be happy to.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Dewan. Thank you. It was really inspiring. Thank you.
Thanks.
Question, sir? Can I ask a brief question? It is like, are we really serious about monitoring and evaluating, information based on big data, or most programs are left in between? Like, we put great ideas, then we just leave the projects in between, because monitoring and we look for objectivity, but we don't cherish it much, and so we leave the monitoring and evaluation part in terms of statistics. That is my experience with social development projects. So what is your opinion, sir?
No, I definitely agree with you. The issue is big data can be used, but we don't have the tools or resources to evaluate them properly. So I'm sure, well, many people are working in that area, and there are so many computer scientists and others. Okay, and eventually there will be processes available to get reliable data from those unstructured and unreliable data. We need to be able to sort them out, right? Now, at this point, we can use the structured data that are available. And again, there are questions. That's why the UN also looks at the performance of the data, because data from some countries are not reliable, or some government sources are not reliable sometimes, because sometimes in some countries, governments may have particular purpose to show their progress, so the data can be compromised. Okay, so we need to keep all of those things in mind as independent researchers. Okay, to what we use and what we should not use, and how much weight we should put on those data that are available. No, I do agree with you that, yeah, when we implement those things, when you try to monitor those things, we always have problems, but we need to achieve some of the goals. So that should be the main target.
Thank you so much, Professor Dewan.